It's really, really helpful. Oh, yep, I've got it.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you so much for that, and welcome everyone to this latest edition of the Talking Heads series. As many of you will know, that Mahuya is, I believe, on annual leave. So I've stepped into the breach and volunteered to chair, which I'm very, very happy to do. So in our usual way, we've got, well, not in our usual way, we've got Vaughan today, which is not in our usual way, but we're so pleased to have him, of course. I'm really excited about this, I'll be honest with you. So it's something that hopefully we're going to learn something as well. But what I'm trying to say is, in our usual way, if we can have questions towards the end, I'll try and keep an eye on the chat as well. So if there are any sort of chatty questions, I can also bring these to the attention of everyone a bit later on. We'll have Vaughan do his presentation. We'll then have room for questions, and let's have a great time, have a lovely lunchtime. So over to you, Vaughan, really.
All right. Thank you, Partridge.
It's okay, De Coster.
De Coster. I know. Well, military, we use last names. We never know first names. So, well, thank you. I'll go ahead and share my screen so I can go here. And we'll go to... There we go. All right. So the topic is social work and social care, photographic interventions with elders, evidence-based best practices. And I'll just let you guys know that how I got into this was several years ago. I was a social worker in the Army, and I was in Iraq working with soldiers back in 2006 to 2007, and a lot of times the people that they were kind of bringing to the therapy sessions, of course, weren't there, so we used images. And so, they bring in pictures, and so it became very useful because as we all know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, a picture also has 1,000 emotions to it too. So there's a lot of affective value attached to photographs. And that's what sparked my interest in that. And so when I came back and demobbed, as we call it, and went back to my life as an academic, I started reading more about it. I got some additional training in it as a clinician, as a therapist. And then I've actually done some research in it. And so a lot of this work that we're going to be talking about today is very useful because I identify as a scholar clinician, and I also have a special interest in gerontology. And so this is very, very helpful in working with elders. So we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to be talking about the rationale for this approach, the purpose of this study in particular. We'll talk about evidence-based practice, the literature analysis portion. And I will emphasize this one point, that this is the same protocol that we're going to be offering students, our master's students this summer, for their dissertation options. So they can, it's a new option that was already embedded in the new course that's going to start in the fall, but we thought we would offer it early, so we got approval to do that. So this protocol we're going to see is going to be the same one that we're going to use as an alternative to what students have been doing. We'll talk about the results, and we're actually going to experience some techniques. We're going to see if you guys have the early signs of Alzheimer's disease using a photograph, so that'll be fun. And then we've got a discussion. Photograph to the right, that gentleman is a psychiatrist, and he didn't start lifting. I think he's 74 when that picture was taken. He didn't start lifting until he was in his early 60s. So again, I think it's a powerful photograph because that dude is very, very fit. All right, so the rationale. So why are we looking at photographs, and why is it important in the use of photography in social work and social care practice? Well, we know in this population, the older adult population, they're exploding. Is that graph on the left side of your screen? Of course, it doesn't have the UK on there, but we know there's similar trends there, that we're just seeing a rapid increase in older adults. I mean, within only 10 years, there will be 1 billion older people worldwide. And we also know that older adults consume more healthcare dollars, or pounds. So we have to come up with some alternatives to care, some things that can supplement or to be sort of a multiplier to what we are doing with traditional forms of healing and caring. So the use of photography and images in social work is not new. It is not new. It goes all the way back to the 1850s when Dr. Hugh Diamond, who was a psychiatrist here in England, he had an asylum and a private asylum, and he used photographs. I mean, this was only not even a decade or so after the photographic process had been established. He used it to track client or patient progress in his asylum. Now, it's interesting because he only photographed women. And you can actually get a coffee table book of his clients, which I don't know about. I guess, protection of identity is probably long since gone. But again, that process was established very early, and he found it to be very effective as a psychiatrist. 1930s or 40s, we saw the use of images kind of stimulate in psychoanalysis, that's kind of the heyday of the psychoanalytic approach. And they used it to stimulate repressed memories. And that's sort of what I was doing with the soldiers and Marines and airmen that I was working with in Iraq. The 1960s, we saw it kind of grow again into photo art therapy. Now, the difference is, whereas I may use existing photographs or assign photographic activities or therapeutic activities, photo art therapy is really about the process of creating art, or in this case, the process of taking photographs. So it's much more analytical, and so a little bit different perspective. The 70s are really kind of seen as the critical decade. That's when the book Phototherapy by Judy Weisner, who I actually trained under in Canada, that's when her book came out. It's considered for phototherapy. It's considered to be kind of the quintessential work, kind of a really major piece of work, as well as Caslow's family photo reconnaissance, which is really interesting. And then the Phototherapy Center was established all in the 1970s. 1980s, we saw it again kind of blossom with the photo treatment book by Hogan. There was a dedicated journal, and then conferences began to be held. And then in the 1990s to the present, there's been a lot of professional trainings. Dr. Weisner is still doing trainings. Other folks are doing trainings. I've done a lot of trainings. We see an international organization kind of blossom. Photo Voice came about, and Photo Voice is really interesting. The Photo Voice Center is actually here in the UK, but it's participatory action research. It's not necessarily a therapeutic technique, and that's what I'm emphasizing and focusing on. Because again, as a clinician, I'm looking for therapeutic techniques. Photo Voice is more of a research technique. It may have therapeutic value, but it is not designed. It's not necessarily run by clinicians, and the intent is to inform, not to treat. So that's a big difference. The other thing I'll just mention in social work, back in the States during the Depression era, Jane Addams and FDR, they used social photographers. I mean, you probably recognize them because they took a lot of photography, a lot of images of the Depression. They actually used that to push legislation, to sway public opinion. So it's macro level social work, it's policy level social work, where they were using photographs to do that. A sociologist who actually was also a social worker back during that time, Lewis Hines, I'm looking at my notes. He is credited with a lot of the child labor laws, and that was his intent, is to get child labor laws pushed because of his photographs. If we had time, I could show you some, and you would probably immediately identify those. So again, photography and images have been around in social work practice for a long time. So my colleague, Dr. Dickinson and I, we did a broader study looking at the therapeutic use of photography in clinical social work. So we didn't just stop at gerontology, we looked at all of it. It was actually very successful and has been one of the better read publications in social work and mental health. And so this project was narrowed down. I wanted to look just at the geriatric or older adult population and what interventions were being designed for them. So the purpose of the project was to identify evidence-supported therapeutic use of photography, photos, and images in geriatrics to inform practice. And this type of work is considered translational research. So I'm looking at all of these studies and translating it, putting it into a useful format for the people that are in the trenches. You know, for the folks that are working at care homes and in local authorities and inpatient mental health facilities, that they can readily use that. So what exactly did we do? So this is the protocol. These are the steps that we're involved in. And we're going to go through some of these and I'll give you a little bit more detail. But how this process works, how some of our master students may be going about this is first you have to clearly identify the issue or the population. So when we're going to do this literature search and literature analysis, we need to either identify an issue, a problem, a topic, and make sure we're very clear when we conceptualize that using that research term, or a population, you know, what techniques are available, you know, for this particular population. Well, in my case, we focused on older adults, or what we classify as elders, those 65 and older. So the next step is you identify the selection criteria. So you're very precise with that. And then you do the Boolean search and determine, you know, we're going to go through that, how that sort of works, the initial hits. Then it becomes more fun. Once you have your database, in other words, the articles that you select that meet your criteria, we then go through reductions by looking at the titles and through a title search. Okay, which of these are a good fit? Then we'd read the abstracts, again, continuing to sort of weed out those that are not going to make the criteria. And then we do the first reads of those articles that do meet the criteria. We go into summarizing, which is part of the analysis, which you'll see. And then the neat thing is, in this type of literature review, is we then determine, you know, which are the best practices, and the best way to identify those are the quality of their methodologies. And we use a standardized instrument to determine that, the methodological quality rating scale, and we rank order them according to that score and whether they had statistically significant improvements on what they were trying to address with that with their elders. We then look for themes and patterns, and then ways to apply it to practice, and then strengths and limitations. So pretty straightforward. So again, for this study, it was the issue or population was the use of photography among older adults, 65 and older. And it was across the practice spectrum. So it's all the way from the micro practice, which I tend to identify more with, you know, as a clinician, as a therapist, you know, working directly with people, all the way up to the Jane Addams, you know, the Depression era, the macro level work that's going on. How can we change opinions? How can we shape legislation? So that macro area. So we looked at everything across that spectrum. Selection criteria. Any intervention using photography or photographs or images, they may not be pictures, but do they use some type of image? Again, we wanted to cast a pretty broad net. And with elders, we stepped it back into 60, so not quite. Usually the criteria for elder is 65 or older, but we brought it back a little bit, again, to broaden our scope. That it addresses any psychosocial, spiritual, social change or policy-related issue, and that they offered some type of evidence supporting their approach. And that evidence could be a case study all the way up to a larger database. So again, it can be from one client up to 1,000 clients, one subject to 10,000 subjects, okay? But they had to offer some evidence. And I'll just throw this out. A lot of times art therapy and the phototherapy, they'll tell you all about the technique, but they don't offer any evidence to show its effectiveness. And that's very important. at least in this project, is we hold, as a clinician, we should hold our standards to the same level that those practitioners working in NAS do. Because our folks are vulnerable and at risk, and they deserve the same quality of care as they should be receiving from their primary care providers. All right, the Boolean search. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I get corrected a lot by the British, just to let you know. So the database, it's a very structured. I like using EBSCO. It covers thousands of journals in the search, and it's just amazing. It goes all the way back in time. So it's wonderful. And this just shows you sort of the breakdown in how that search is done. Again, usually, and this is the same thing, our students will do this, and it's the kind of the topic area, therapeutic or intervention or activity or program. All of those words are used, and then we add outcomes, and then the subject population. So the results, the initial hit, and it went back from 1894, something came up, to 2021, we had about 2,427. So from that, going through the title search, and yes, we read 2,427 titles. And it goes fairly quickly, because you can pretty well tell immediately if it's going to be a fit or not, initially. So 217 articles were pulled from that 2,000 plus group. From that 2017, we read all the abstracts, and it's like, okay, here's 81. 81 articles were then read, and it came down to 22 that met our inclusion criteria that I mentioned earlier. So excluded if it was non-treatment. Sometimes it took us all the way reading an article that it was not an intervention, it was not a treatment, it was not designed to improve, or the primary intent of it was not to address a service user's need. And for instance, photo voice, wonderful technique, has a lot of therapeutic value, but it's really not designed as an intervention in that sense. So a lot of those were not included. And there's a bunch. There's some really interesting photo voice stuff. So it's hard to want to just exclude those. And then we had a bunch of treatment intervention. They offered a program or a strategy, but then there was no evidence. And that's real common in art therapy too. They'll talk all about the technique, but then they don't offer it. And I think we have to be careful, because then we start using things that don't have proof of their effectiveness. And then here we show what was included, the photography, photos within a therapeutic relationship. We also included approaches or strategies in non-clinical activities. So it was assisted or designed by the social worker, but not done by the social worker. And I think that's really, really important. I don't think that people need us necessarily to get better or to heal or to improve. But I think we can design strategies and self-running interventions and coach and aid them. But I don't think you necessarily always have to have a social worker to get better, because a lot of our clients do get better without us. And lastly, clinical tools or screening instruments. There was a lot of really nice things that came out in that regard too. So the summarization, okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to have to stop sharing, and I'm going to pull up this spreadsheet. I should have pulled up sooner, because let me pull it up. Sorry, I didn't have this pulled up. Here we go. And I will share this spreadsheet. So it's a little bit harder, because when we summarize, we're actually showing, and there's a lot of different ways you can summarize it. We're trying to put it into a useful format for practitioners, or for any user. Okay, there we go. Okay, so as you can see, this is how I've organized it. So, and this sheet, I'll just show you really quick. This is what our students will get. Again, this is an option. This is not replacing the original research. that's always been offered to our master's students for them to do their dissertations. This is simply another option for them to use. But it has this, then it has a summary table that they can then adapt. And so we include all these articles, we list them by the 22, last name of authors, what was the focus, so what were they trying to accomplish, recall of clinical staff roles, names, quality of communication, assertiveness, test virtual reality with elders, assess care needs. So again, what was the focus? What was the intent of the intervention, the strategy, the program? What were they trying to do? Target population, again, this is geriatric. So was it acute care, adult day centers, healthy elders, non-clinical memory complaints, again, and then community dwelling, a lot of them were community dwelling. So again, part of this is so when the social worker is reviewing these techniques, they've got this quick summary table that they can go through and see, oh, okay, well, I'm working in an adult day center, so this intervention may be something I could use. Doesn't mean they can't take an intervention for, somebody, a primary care patient or someone, in a care home, but they do need to keep in mind that the research was done with this population. We then have a brief review of the intervention, just really quick. It's not enough that they could replicate it, but enough that they have an idea about it, and they can then go to the original study. Let me see if there we go. I had to make that smaller. Okay, so then the mode. So what was the mode of intervention? Was it a one-on-one approach? Was it a group? Was it a class? It could be a community-based approach. How many subjects were involved in the study? Because again, just, getting back to that quantitative part and evidence, larger data sets give us more data points to determine if something's effective. Age, what was the average age, and then percentage female, significant outcomes, and then the discipline. Just to give you an idea for this this particular study on the use of photography and images with elders, the bulk of these, so when we analyze, we look for themes, not only in just these dimensions, but also when you really immerse yourself in the techniques you're looking for. Are there similar techniques? Are people doing similar things that we can pull from? Is with the target population, the majority of these interventions were for community dwelling elders. So about 60% of all these techniques were folks that were in community. So that's good. About 23% were for inpatient or hospital-based. And then it was split from adult day centers to residential care homes. The most common mode of delivery was individual or one-on-one. So about 68% of these techniques were focused on one-on-one or individual approaches. About a third was in groups, and a small group was in classes. The discipline, this is interesting, the disciplines that are doing this work. The largest, about a fourth, was by psychology. Psychologists were doing about 23%. Then it's pretty evenly split at 14% with social work, nursing, and medicine. Actually, psychiatrists are doing, they were up at 18%. So that just kind of gives you an idea. Okay, let me, I think while we're here, I can also show you, so that the next step after we summarize, so we've got this, we analyze it. Again, we're trying to communicate. This is like a buffet of phototherapy. We're not going to be teaching all of these techniques in this article, but at least we give you a really good snapshot of what's being done, and then you can go back and pull that original article. So when we do our methodology, our quality check, we're using Miller et al. Standardized instrument, the MQRS. And what that does is it looks at basically the methodology and looking at kind of the gold standard for what we'd want to see in clinical research. And it gives you an evaluate, it gives you a number that you can use to say, okay, this is how the study ranked. And so like study design, it goes from single group, observation only, all the way up to are randomized with a control group, the experimental design, because we know that's the gold standard. That's what they did when they did the COVID vaccine. And so that's really common in clinical medical research. And so that's the gold standard for research. That gets you the top score for study design. Theoretical, again, theory-based. Clinical research is based on clear theories, clear expectations before you go to the data set. We don't do grounded theory with clinical research. So that would be like testing a new chemo drug by administering it to a bunch of people or administering a bunch of chemicals to people and assuming, well, let's see which chemical really works. We don't do that in practice. So treatment integrity. Did they standardize their treatment? Did they train people before they administered these interventions? Was there a manual? So again, we want to make sure that everyone's getting the same intervention. They're all getting the same product, if you will. So did we standardize that? That's big in the service industry, and it's big in medicine and should be big in social work as well. Now, are we just delivering a similar product? So did they have that? That got them a score from 0 or 2. Measures, how did they evaluate? Did they use standardized measures with good psychometric qualities? And they're out there. They really are. There's a lot of really good ones out there. If you're going to be measuring post-traumatic stress disorder, are you using the PCL? That's the gold standard for measuring post-traumatic stress disorder. For well-being, is it the Warwick, which is out of Scotland, which is the gold standard for measuring well-being. Anxiety, the Beck Anxiety Inventory, the Beck Depression Inventory, the PHQ-9 for depression. Again, are they using standardized measures? So it's a nice, well-validated and reliable measure for that problem. So that got them a better score. Did they look at length or follow-up or maintenance phase? Did they see if the treatment persisted after the intervention ended or after the program ended? Dosage level, again, a very clinical medical type term, but really important if you're doing a stress management training using nature photographs, which we're going to look at some here in just a second. What happens if somebody attends 5 sessions versus 7 sessions, or somebody attends 10 sessions? Do they get more than that? Medicine is really interested in how few sessions do you have to get for the intervention to be effective, whether it's antibiotics or chemotherapy. And maybe we need to be thinking the same thing in social work. So again, that showed you. Dropouts in nutrition. Did the article, did the study, for all these different program evaluations, did they really talk about dropouts in nutrition? Because that's really important, because people that were going to be successful no matter what they did may have just stayed in the clinical trial for the use of photography. What about the folks that dropped out? Blind follow-up, okay, again, that's really important. Was it a blind study as far as the evaluators and the subjects did not know? Multi-site, again, using multiple sites in the intervention is important, and it was scored differently. And then did the article talk about generalizability? So for each study that's included or article that's a part of our data set for this, this was done for each one, and they each had a score. All that gets entered in this handy dandy sheet. You can see if the 10 criteria, and it comes up with a score. And as you can see for our studies, they usually didn't score very well. Top score is 53% out of 100. The top MQRS that you can get is 32. And when that happens, is all this stuff is auto-populated in the spreadsheet. And so we can see their scores. So right away, which techniques are methodologically best practice. So, but we take it a step further, because in addition to their methodological quality, we also want to know, did they have statistically significant outcomes? And for all these studies, we only had 2. And so there's a lot of room for research when it comes to actually a lot of social work practice. There's a lot of room for research. So yeah, we only had 2 that were statistically significant. So you can easily easily say there is room for need. Let me go back, and I'm going to share with you, go back to the PowerPoint. I can find it. I got a bunch of time. Here we go. All right, let me keep moving right along. So hop through here before we get quite there. So, you know, some of the studies, it was the ones that were effective. It was everything. There were interventions as far as improving mood and well-being among elders in an adult day center. Some of the research, one looked at reducing pain during PT, physical therapy, that they found that they had photographs that the elders would look at as they were doing their it was actually cardiac rehab. And they found that elders that had those photographs to look at while they were going through rehabilitation reported statistically less pain. I mean, that's just amazing. Improvement in mood and depression. Another study used assignment of, well, it was photographic assignments to take pictures of things that they felt were important in their identities, and found that they had a significant improvement in well-being and mood and connection to other people because they had the assignments, they came together as a group, they shared their images, they talked about them, and they did that for 6 weeks, and they had positive outcomes for that. So it's amazing. There's a lot of potential in these techniques. We are going to look at we're going to look at two in particular. This is one, Gamble and Howard. This is a really neat technique that has been, it's been replicated. This is one that myself and Neil Gibson, who is at Robert Gordon University in up there in Scotland, we are looking at doing something with social work students as far as a way to, in particular, to improve mood. It's not a therapeutic technique, and another one that occurs within a relationship. It's one that's done on your own, and it's really simple. It's just viewing 50 nature photographs routinely, and this is, the timing is about 7 seconds per picture for about 6 minutes. And let me pull up that, and you can use, okay, can you guys see this, the new screen? Just somebody give me a yay or a nay.
We can't see it yet, Vaughan.
No.
Okay,
No.
cool. Let me go to share. Okay, and so what they found, and they were using, okay, now you should be able to see it.
Yeah, got this one.
We can see that now. Thank
Okay.
you.
So what this intervention did, and it really simple, it improved executive attention, memory, and improved mood, is 2 to 3 times a week, the elder viewed, not necessarily these pictures, but did this, and it was 7 seconds. This is sped up a little bit. By exposure to these scenes from nature, which again, if you remember early on in my talk, I discussed where photographs have affective value. So there's a feeling meaning to these images. And so when you expose yourself to positive images, it's just like when you see a negative image, you go, oh, you know, so you have a more positive affective response. So you're getting a dose of positive emotions by looking at these images. That's helpful. The other thing that they found was helpful is by taking just a few moments and focusing on this. It's very much like a meditation. It gives your mind a break, and it improves wellness. So again, they found significant improvements. The adaption that makes this even more powerful is where, and it's really cool. This one study didn't have evidence, but they took this and they were expanding it, is where you have culturally relevant scenes from nature, or even better, where the elders or your participant group, they actually take the photographs themselves and as a group decide which images are we going to use. So then you're really adding, and they can be original photographs or ones that they've already had that can be scanned then, because then you're taking photographs that not only have affective value, positive value by itself, but you also have memories, shared memories. So you get kind of a twofer there, and so you can see the benefits of that. So again, it's just an amazing intervention technique. So yeah, Neil and I are, again, we're working on designing, we're getting pretty close. We're pretty happy with where we're at. Where again, we'll just expose students to this and see how it affects their mood. So I'll go ahead and stop. There's another technique that I want to show, a little bit different. Let me go back to, all right. Now, so they actually used, big here. So they use the PANS techniques, a positive and negative affective schedule, which is really very cool. And so they would have their participants, the elders, actually rate their emotions before, and this is really straightforward, and then rated it afterwards. And again, what they found is that by just viewing these images, even your brief exposure, is that they found that there, as you can see down here, the PANS, the positive feeling states and negative states, it went from a 35 to a 37, which was for their group was a significant increase. So that's just looking at pictures and improve their mood, and it decreased negative affective. So that was significant. They also did a digits test because executive functioning, that's really important in aging. They found that it improved, and that was a really significant improvement. That elders could remember more numbers after they went through this calming intervention. So that was pretty neat. This next one, all of you will be involved with. So it's a neurological screening test to detect early stage of Alzheimer's disease. It's really simple. I mean, it just involves looking at this one picture. I mean, it's really neat because it's been found to be very effective. And so it would be great for NHS folks that need to do something like this very quickly, very cost effective. I mean, it just takes a little bit of time. So what we're going to do is you guys are going to look at this image. You can't take notes. No note taken. Don't cheat. So you can't look at any notes. Finding my sheet. Here we go. So we're going to look at it for 1 minute and just try to memorize everything that you see just by looking at it. And then we're going to do what's called a distractor. And then we're going to see how you recall. Okay. So here we go. I'm just going to use my watch. So once we're ready, I'm going to give you 1 minute. Try to memorize everything that you see in that image right there. All right, we got 15 seconds left. And you'll want to write down, when I tell you to, as many as that you can remember, but I'll let you know when to do that. Okay, so now we do the digital forward task, the distractor task. So you guys can actually, you can just say this, you don't have to turn on your microphones, but I'm going to say numbers and I want you to repeat them back. So 83, 28, 68. So you have to repeat those back. 829, 132, 152. 6,241, 2,359, 7,132. And usually I stop at this point because when we get into 84,132 and people try to remember them, they just, they go crazy. So now take a minute and write down as many things that you can remember from that image. And we'll see how you do. We'll see if there's possible Alzheimer's in your future. So just take a minute and jot down as many of those things. I'm sure Mab is getting all of them. I think she's got a very good brain. All right, just a couple more seconds. All right, let's see how you did. So there were 23 items, telephone, bookshelf, you can kind of see all those. There was 23. And for folks that were 75 years of age or less, so less than 75, with no Alzheimer's disease, they could recall on average almost 14. With Alzheimer's disease, so I know everybody's younger than 75, they can only recall about 7.5, 7.5. So 14 and above, no Alzheimer's disease for you, at least not right now. Less than 8, chances are. For folks that were older than 75, no Alzheimer's disease, they could recall a little bit less than the younger, but about 13, and you can see the difference for the folks with Alzheimer's disease, it was only 6. So again, quick screening tool. It's not a diagnostic tool, but it's a quick screening tool that's been very effective. Just going to hit a few things and then we'll go into questions. Again, this was the no prescription intervention for pain management. Really amazing, looking at 60 culturally relevant figures, images during physiotherapy sessions. Just did a wonderful job and reduced pain during that. This is another one. This is to enhance public and personal understanding of aging. Again, it showed significant improvements in mood with this simple photo assignment. Really nice study that had good evidence behind it as well. This is one, if we had time, the Who Are You is another intervention techniques that's shown to improve identity and well-being. All right, it went awfully fast. So what questions do you have for me? And so this was kind of twofold. One, I wanted to give you sort of an idea of the methodology for this approach. You don't get to see a lot of the analysis and the themes and patterns. That it's kind of fun. The limitations, the stuff that when you really do this sort of, not really a meta-analysis, but when you do this type of literature review type stuff.
Can I ask then, within the methodology, did you take into account learning needs and learning disabilities? Because I was okay in the memorizing the picture and all the different objects in it, but as soon as you said numbers, because of my dyslexia, I turned off straight away. And so I went from all those nice slides in a good mood and feeling, yes, I can do anything, I can climb that mountain, memorizing so much and knowing I memorize so much to then all of a sudden, oh no, my brain can't work that way. I can't do the numbers, and turning off, you know.
Well, I don't know if they factored that in. But the numbers test is it's meant to be a distractor test. It's meant to see if will those things stay in your memory for, you know, the 1 or 2 minutes that you have the distractor thing going on. So yeah, if it did distract you, then that's what it was meant to do. So, and then it's like, okay, then what's the recall like? Linus?
Sorry, yeah, I love the pictures. Just looking at the pictures, actually, I did find them very therapeutic. And I did scan through your research paper, and one of the recommendations you had made in the conclusion, you said that actually social workers should not be deterred from using these methods as long as they recognize and improve protocol and supporting evidence of deficits. So from your own research, obviously, and experience, what would be some of those barriers or factors that would actually deter social workers from using these methods? Because I did find it very, very therapeutic.
And there's so many methods that I think that the one, and it's more of a cautionary note, is using techniques that aren't substantiated, that don't have proof of effectiveness. You know, that would be like going to our primary care physician and having them, you know, her prescribe something that they're not sure about whether it's fitting. Now they actually do that. They will go off script and use something and think, okay, and they should tell you, okay, this wasn't designed for your problem, but let's see if it's going to work. But so that would be my biggest is social workers not understanding the protocols and maybe using some that aren't for their population or wasn't designed, without having a really good understanding and giving some critical thinking about, okay, I'm using a technique that was designed for adolescents, I'm going to use it on older folks. You know, is that appropriate? Is there going to be any problems there? So now but I think social workers are naturally creative, and, you know, and we adapt things to make them work. I just ask that they evaluate it and make sure that they're doing something to see if it's doing what we want it to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for reading that paper. Oh, someone read it. It's always a shock when people read stuff that you publish. Christina.
Thank you, Vaughan. I really enjoyed your presentation. I think it's very interesting, and I've never came across something. The use of pictures in social work. So it was very interesting. I have 2 questions that I don't know, because I'm sorry. I always take my opportunity.
I know you do.
So it might be that it's just because I'm not familiar with the literature on or research done in medicines or as a clinician. But the first question was, like, in terms of the evidence, you were talking about the studies, you were looking at the evidence that the studies did you identified in terms of effectiveness, what kind of evidence they provided. And my question was it based on people's perceptions of how that intervention, how it, for instance, had improved their mental health, or is that evidence was taken into account maybe more like hard outcomes in terms of they experienced fewer crises, or they reduced the medication, and what sort of evidence you found? And the second one, which is related in using the pictures, are the therapeutic effects just lasting for longer than what you, so I can understand that when you are watching the pictures, then you have those positive emotions, but for how long do those positive emotions last, and how do you measure that even? that impact in a more long term?
Well, I'll address your second question sort of first. Is how you address it long term is you have money. Longitudinal research is just expensive. I mean, it's expensive for everything, you know, where you can follow up at 3, 6, 9, 12. And actually the MQRS, the rating scale, does look at you know, post-intervention, you know, how long, and that's part of a grading for their methodological quality. Do you look at, like you were just saying, is there long-term effects for that? So yeah, the best way to do that is to have money so you can follow up with all that. But on the other side, and you raised a really good point, or emphasized it before, is that studies that use standardized instruments, those that have been validated and found to be valid and reliable, that's, you know, that's kind of the gold standard. Or you have an objective behavior, you know, like you said, reduction of certain negative behaviors or an increase in positive ones. You know, those are more valuable. And so the standardized instruments, that's what medicine, that's what everyone else uses, because then everybody knows, okay, you're using this measure to determine this outcome, and so it's been accepted and validated and so forth. And so, and the studies were ranked better if they use those types of standardized measures. But, you know, self-reports are out there. There's a lot of good research that says, especially in healthcare, self-reports of health tend to be really valid and accurate. More so than we give them credit for being. But yeah, we still want to see we want to see that triangulation. We want to see self-reports triangulated with either observable behaviors or standardized measures. Cool. Wow, I answered both your questions. That is good. So I've seen some speakers stumble when you ask questions. So.
Evie?
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. De Coster, for that. That's a very unique thing. I've never seen it in social work. It's my first time, but it's very, very interesting. I'm just trying to relate this with an experience that I've had. I work with children mostly, so I'm trying to focus it again on children. Right. I was working with this child with learning speech and language issues, sort of like learning disability, global delay, and so forth. Now, one of the things that I did was to take him out and go for a walk and say to him, look around. And when we went back into the house, I said, what did you see? Write down what you've seen and tell me what you saw and so forth. And the child started to write a few things and all that. So I'm thinking, from what you have said, how do you think we can develop this further in terms of helping these young people? Because some of them have got this short concentration span. You know, when you use images and things like that, they get captured so easily. How would we develop this further, you think?
There's actually a lot of pre-existing strategies. I've taught this phototherapy, the use of photography in social work practice. I've taught it as an entire undergraduate module. I've taught it as an entire graduate module. I mean, a 16-week course. I've taught it in seminar settings where we look at the different age groups. And there's nothing wrong with taking a technique as long as you're being very mindful and aware that you're taking it for one population, and I'm going to adapt it and try it with a younger group. But there's a lot of good techniques out there. There's a lot of good trainings, either by myself or there's some a lot of different scholars. Judy Weisner is taking a lot of her stuff online. Now her stuff tends to be more psychoanalytic. There's, again, a full-blown training is a lot of fun. You know, even a day-long seminar, which I've done, because we actually do these techniques. We'll do some projective techniques with existing photographs. We will do some photo assignments where you're given a task to go, and then you work in the group process. So it's just really, really cool. And you can see where even folks that either English is a second language or they have speech issues, they're either too young or they're older and they have aphasia. There's a lot of stuff where when we can't communicate or can't find words for it, it's amazing how we can find pictures for it. So yeah, there's, like I said, if you want some additional readings, I could share that with you. Just email me and I can load you up. So there's a lot of stuff. And on Judy has a nice Facebook page. There's just tons of stuff. A lot of stuff going on in Italy with phototherapy too.
All right. Okay.
Thank you.
Mark Groves, could this technique be combined with local social history? Oh yeah, no, Mark, that's a really good, no, that's excellent, because you could, again, there's a lot of cool techniques about shaping opinions, looking at well-being. I didn't even talk about, I did a thing with veterans looking at telling their coming home story using images. And either original or those that they found. They work with a social work student and a photography student, undergraduate student, and they designed their photo narrative, if you will. So it was, yeah, no, Mark, that's a cool idea. And, you know, it just takes, you know, we get somebody to give us a little money or a local authority to, you know, pitch an idea and then go for it. Yeah, you no, oh, Mark, okay. Let me this has got to get out of my brain. Mark, we could do a community-based intervention to try improve, like through history and like the Black country, or even people from Dudley, improve like a community wellness by looking at their history and validating it. And yeah, no, that would be really cool, Mark. I like that.
Well, thank you, Vaughan. I'm very conscious of time. And I know a number of people need to go to other meetings and things, but can I just thank you for such an interesting talk, so fascinating, and you've left me now wanting to know more and to do more. So you've succeeded in your presentation, I think. Good. However, I have to say I am a little bit worried though, with my results. I can only remember 12 things, so I'm only getting a little bit worried about myself. And the numbers, I couldn't remember any of the numbers at all. But I did like the pictures though. I love the sort of idea that Mark brought about the sort of social history stuff. And I know we have talked very briefly, haven't we, Vaughan, some time ago now, especially around the Chinese community. And that's still something that's going to be sort of looked into. But anyway, without further ado, can I just say thank you very much. If we're all in a room, we'll all be clapping now, by the way. So please, absolutely wonderful session. So thank you very much. No, not Apindajit's gone, but Mahuya will be back next time. So you won't have me, so that's good. So what are you laughing at, Groves? Yes, without further ado, thank you so much, and see you next time.